Welcome to Kitchen Politics. I'm Hampton Dellinger and delighted to be joined again by Ruth Sheehan for years, I won't say decades, but for years, an amazing reporter and columnist for the News Observer, before that for Freedom Newspapers. Zack Hawkins, school teacher in our middle schools and high school, two-term chair of the Young Democrats of North Carolina, now in the nonprofit sector. Ken Lewis, great to have you back, candidate for U.S. Senate and chair of the Elaine Marshall campaign, and lawyer in private practice. We've got, I guess, parents, all of us who've been here before, and great that we're able to get Tom Jensen into the kitchen. Tom, tell us what you've been doing.
Well, Hampton, it's good to be with you all. I'm the Director of Public Policy Polling, which is a national polling company located in Raleigh. And even though we poll all over the country, we're still certainly more interested in what's happening in North Carolina and the Triangle than anywhere else.
And labeled at times a progressive or Democratic pollster, but known above all for the accuracy of your numbers. Is that right?
Yep. All of our clients are Democrats and progressive causes, but certainly our top objective as a polling company is simply to get it right. And I think that we've built a reputation for that.
Well, I've been trying to get my mind around these four pivotal events I see happening on the North Carolina political landscape in the months to come. We've got the local municipal elections, county commissioner, city council, mayors taking place in the fall of 2011. We've got the statewide primaries and congressional races in the spring of 2012. Then we've got the Democratic National Convention coming to Charlotte in the first week of September 2012, and then the general election in, of course, the first Tuesday, I think November 5th this year, November 6th of 2012. And so I would just want to think through how each of those moments may transpire individually and collectively, what might happen. And Tom, I guess to start with you, what will we be able to tell, if anything, from the local elections that are going to take place in the fall of this year?
The biggest thing is going to be seeing who's excited to come out and vote right now. In the fall of 2009, you saw that Republicans were a lot more excited than Democrats. That's why Republicans took over the Wake County School Board, why they won a mayoral race in Greensboro where you wouldn't expect it. You really saw that the energy was on the Republican side, and that's something that really held true all the way through last November. It wasn't so much that voters turned against the Democrats. Democrats just stayed home. Whereas you had a 13-point Democratic advantage in who voted in 2008, you only had a 6-point Democratic advantage in who voted in 2010. So what I'm going to be watching is, do the Democrats come back? Because that's going to be a good indicator of whether they're going to come back next year as well.
And I think mentioning that Greensboro mayoral race where Yvonne Johnson, the Democratic incumbent, elected easily in 2007, then lost in 2009, was the real canary in the coal mine that I think too few people appreciated the signal that sent, that what a tough year 2010 would be based on what happened in 29. Well, Tom mentioned the Wake County School Board election. That's been in the news ever since the Republican majority took over in 2009. You live in Wake County. You've got school-age kids. What have you thought about what you've seen happen?
Well, this is the #1 issue that makes me regret not being a columnist anymore. I will say that. My kids actually attend most of the imperiled magnet schools in Wake County. And in a way, a lot turns on this election, but it's more symbolic than anything else, because I don't think we're going to see a shift yet in terms of the majority on that board. Tom, perhaps you have a perspective on that as well. But I do think it's going to be a moment where we can see, we are going to see a more energized electorate on the other side. We certainly saw one for this new Republican majority that's turned this astonishingly good school system upside down. So it'll be interesting to see. I think we're going to see a real, an amazing effort on the Democratic side or on the progressive side to make a difference.
And Zack, you've been making a difference. You made a difference in classrooms in North Carolina. What is the relationship between the policy is set by a county school board, a local school board, and what happens in the classroom?
Well, absolutely. I mean, from literally from everything that they teach in the classroom, from curriculum to the budget that's set, is controlled by the school board. As you can see, what happened in Wake County, if they want to change the entire structure of the way schools operate, they absolutely have the autonomy to do it. What bothers, I think, me and tons of other people is that the school board just goes so far under the radar. You don't think about it as a power-making body. You don't think about it as a huge decision-making thing. It's, maybe a few concerned parents that are, making sure that their children's school life is better than theirs. And so now I think because of the national attention that the Wake County School Board race got, as well as statewide, I think we're going to see a whole lot more people paying attention and a lot of targeted candidacies for people that are really understanding of how business and politics and education work together. And
certainly that 2009 school board election in Wake County flew very much under the radar. Of course, Ken, you know a lot of mayors. I think you followed as you ran in 2010, thought a lot about those 2009 mayoral races. There are going to be some key ones in 2011. What are you looking for?
Well, I think typically in municipal races, local issues have dominated as opposed to party issues or national issues. But I agree with Tom. It's going to be interesting to see in this cycle whether or not the energy that we saw in 2009 and then 2010, whether that really overtakes the local issues that typically affect the local races. So I'm going to be watching to see whether or not we see a repeat of kind of an energy-fed election results as opposed to a real local issues-led election results.
Well, it's also interesting because a lot of those local races, including the school board races, tend to be officially nonpartisan races.
Right.
And so they should be about the issues at hand. That changed in 2009, especially in the Wake County School Board.
Well, and it's interesting, you're going to have in Wake County, in its largest municipality, in Raleigh, an open mayoral race for the first time in probably close to a decade. Charles Meeker not running for another term. Three very strong candidates will be discussing the issues. I'd love to do a kitchen politics outdoors, get the candidates on a street corner talking about their visions in a very localized way. In Durham, of course, Bill Bell will be seeking election, I think, nearly by acclamation once again. Anthony Fox in Charlotte, the mayor who brought the Democrat National Convention to North Carolina, says he wants to make sure he's got a seat inside the stadium as mayor. So he's been running aggressively.
I think another important issue in North Carolina will be this North Carolina is going to be very important in national elections. And we know that our electoral votes could decide the presidency this time around. Barack Obama won by 5,000 votes in 2008. So every vote counts. And has counted in North Carolina. I think you could see in these mayoral races kind of a precursor of that, people trying to work on their field operations in anticipation of the importance of those operations in 2012. And so you could see a much higher turnout and much more activity fed from the national parties in North Carolina in these local races, something we've not really seen before because of the upcoming elections in 2012.
And then look into the statewide primaries in presumably May of 2012, depending on whether the lawsuits related to redistricting delay the timetable, as has happened in years before in North Carolina, and that'll be another kitchen politics episode. But Tom, as you think about what's going to happen in the primaries, all the energy at the presidential level will be on the Republican side in North Carolina, and it could be a very meaningful Republican primary in North Carolina in 2012, but what else are you paying particular attention to when it comes to those spring primaries in 2012 in North Carolina?
Well, there's a couple interesting things to look at. One thing is I think we sort of take for granted that Pat McCrory is going to be the Republican nominee for governor. But when we talk to Republican primary voters, they say they actually want someone more conservative than McCrory to be their nominee. So it's going to be really interesting in these next 3 or 4 months to see if that sort of Tea Party challenger to McCrory emerges. And
as it did in so many states in 2010,
absolutely,
including Delaware, in Colorado with Ken Buck, Delaware with Christina I'm Not a Witch O'Donnell, in other states. And I know, I think that's a real open question whether McCrory has completely solidified the Republican nomination for governor.
Yeah, and one thing that's particularly interesting about those Tea Party challenges is some of those folks, the Christine O'Donnells of the world, they were down 50 points in the polls a month before the election. I mean, they made that entire climb back in 1 month before the election. So, you know, if somebody decides to run against McCrory, get some interest from national conservatives groups, Club for Growth, that kind of thing, it could get pretty interesting. And then the other thing that I think is really going to be worth watching in the primaries, and I think we'll end up having a lot of runoffs, is with congressional redistricting, we really are going to have probably 4 or 5 new Republican congressmen who, if they win their party nomination, they win in the fall because these new districts are so gerrymandered. And because of that, I think the folks are really going to be lining up. You're going to see districts where there's 8, 9 people running, which means no one's going to get to 40%. And I think we'll have an unusually active runoff election in June with a lot of these folks sort of chomping at the bit for these new opportunities.
Tom, you weren't here the first time we gathered in the kitchen, but I was talking about George Holding, the Republican U.S. attorney who is now seeking the Republican nomination for Congress in the 13th district. And it's interesting, as powerful a candidacy as you think he would bring with his activism as U.S. attorney, with the family funds available to him through the Holding family, there's still a number of Republicans, Paul Coble and others, who say, you know, bring on this fight. There's no coronation here.
Absolutely, and I think actually the division that we're going to see in these Republican primaries is as much of a ray of hope for Democrats as there is in these races, that the Republican nominees will emerge extremely bloodied, that in some of these races the Republicans might nominate someone who's just way too far to the right. So when you look at these districts that went for John McCain by 14, 15 points, on paper, they look really unwinnable for Democrats. But what Democrats can hope for is that Republicans emerge from these very divisive primaries a little bit in less good shape than you would expect.